The emergency klaxons shattered the peaceful hum of the celestial dawn, sending every crew member into immediate alert. Drock's massive form moved through the corridors with predatory grace, his scaled hide rippling with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed his distress. The Chthoni commander stood nearly 8 feet tall, apex predator physiology evident in every movement, retractable claws, reinforced skeletal structure, sensory organs that could detect a heartbeat from 50 meters away. His cubs were missing. Status report. Drock's voice rumbled through the bridge, a subsonic growl that made the deck plates vibrate. "Sir, we've scanned every section," replied his second-in-command, mandibles clicking nervously. "No trace in the Chthoni quarters, the nursery, or the observation decks." Drock's claws extended involuntarily. His species had ruled their sector of space for millennia, feared and respected across 100 worlds. Chthoni young were precious, their birth rate was devastatingly low, and his 2 cubs represented not just his lineage but the hope of his entire clan. To lose them aboard a diplomatic vessel surrounded by a dozen alien species. "Find them, now!" The command carried the weight of barely controlled violence. It was the Etherian navigator who finally spoke up, her crystalline form chiming softly. "Commander, perhaps we should check the human quarters." Every head on the bridge turned toward her, the human. Of course, Drock's lips curled back, revealing rows of serrated teeth. Humans, those strange, soft-skinned creatures who had stumbled into the galactic community barely a generation ago. Deathworlders, they called them, though Drock found the term laughable. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no venom. They were so fragile that a simple puncture wound could kill them through infection. "The human is not even a proper predator," Drock snarled. But fear made him desperate. "Very well. Send a security team." Sierra Lynn's quarters were modest by human standards, luxurious by the ship's utilitarian design. She decorated with what little she could bring, a small terrarium of earth plants, some worn books, a quilt her grandmother had made. The lighting was dimmed to what humans called evening mode, and soft music played from a personal device. When Drock burst through the door, claws ready to retrieve his stolen cubs, he froze. There, on the human's chest, lay his 2 cubs. Curled together in a tangle of scaled limbs and tiny tails, they slept peacefully. Their bioluminescent patterns pulsed in the slow, steady rhythm of deep contentment. One of them, his daughter, had her small claws hooked gently into the fabric of the human's shirt. Sierra Lynn sat propped against her headboard, a datapad balanced on one knee, completely immobile. Her eyes flicked up to meet Drock's gaze, and she raised one finger to her lips in the universal gesture for silence. "They wandered in about 2 hours ago," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I tried to call, but they'd already climbed up and ... She glanced down at the sleeping cubs. "I didn't want to disturb them." Drock's combat instincts screamed at him. This made no sense. Chthoni cubs were apex predators from birth. Their claws could shred synth steel, their bite force could crack bone. Even in sleep, they should have registered the human as potential prey or threat. Yet here they were, vulnerable and trusting, nestled against the softest target on the ship. "How are you not injured?" Drock demanded, though he kept his voice low. Sierra smiled slightly. "They were very careful. Your daughter tested my hand first, just a little pressure with her claws. When I didn't react badly, she seemed to decide I was safe." She shifted minutely, trying to restore circulation to her legs. "They've been purring for the last hour." "I didn't know Chthoni could purr." "We don't," Drock said automatically. But the evidence contradicted him. A low, thrumming vibration emanated from both cubs, a sound he'd never heard from his species before. "Commander," Sierra continued carefully, "I've read the xenobiology reports. Chthoni cubs are... They're hardwired to seek the strongest, safest presence nearby, right? Something about alpha predator instincts?" Drock's spines flattened against his skull, a gesture of confusion. "Yes, they should have sought me, or perhaps the Vraxian Marines, not..." He gestured helplessly at her. "Not the fragile human?" Sierra's expression held no offense, only curiosity. "May I offer a theory?" Drock's nictitating membranes flickered. "Speak. Humans are endurance predators. Back on Earth, we didn't have claws or armor or venom. We had something else. Persistence. We could track prey for days, weeks even. We can regulate our body temperature, maintain steady rhythms, outlast almost anything. She looked down at the cubs, and we evolved alongside pack animals. Wolves, dog species that bonded with us not because we were the strongest, but because we were steady, reliable, safe. She gestured to her chest, where her heartbeat would be steady and strong beneath the cubs. I'm warm. I'm breathing slowly. My heartbeat is regular and calm. To your cub's instincts, I'd probably writ as the most stable thing on this ship, a constant they can trust. Drock stared at this small human who held his most precious treasures against her vulnerable body. He'd seen humans in combat simulations. They were creative, terrifyingly persistent, and utterly refusing to acknowledge when they were beaten. But this dust was different. You sat here for 2 hours, he said slowly, without moving. Without disturbing them. Of course, Sarah looked genuinely confused by his tone. They're children. They needed rest, and they felt safe. What else would I do? What else indeed? A Crithani adult would have immediately established dominance. A Vraxian would have summoned the parent. Most species would have at least shifted the cubs to a more comfortable position. But this human had simply endured, accepted the discomfort, the responsibility, the trust of 2 sleeping predators. On Earth, Sarah said softly, we have a saying, let sleeping babies lie. It means you don't disturb a sleeping child, no matter how inconvenient, because their rest is more important than your comfort. Drock's claws retracted, fully a gesture of complete non-aggression. You are not what I expected, Sarah Lynn. Few humans are, she replied with a gentle smile. We're not the biggest or the strongest or the fastest. But we're very, very good at caring for things smaller than ourselves. His son stirred slightly, and Sarah's hand moved instinctively to steady him, her touch gentle but confident. The cub settled immediately, sinking deeper into sleep. May I? Drock asked, gesturing carefully toward his cubs. Of course. Just move slowly. They're pretty deep asleep now. It took several minutes of careful extraction, but eventually both cubs were cradled in their father's arms, still purring softly. As Drock turned to leave, he paused at the doorway. Thank you, Sarah Lynn. You have honored my clan today. Anytime, Commander. Your cubs are beautiful. As the door sealed behind him, Drock looked down at his sleeping children and reconsidered everything he thought he knew about humans. They weren't apex predators in the traditional sense. They were something perhaps more dangerous, a species that could make even the fiercest predators young feel safe enough to dream. Perhaps Deathworlder was the wrong term entirely. Perhaps Lifeworlder was more accurate. His daughter's claws were still hooked into his hide, and for the first time in hours, Drock allowed himself to relax. In the quiet of the corridor, he could have sworn he heard the echo of that strange human heartbeat, steady, calm and utterly unafraid, reliable, safe, human.